Okay. Hi, Lance. How are you?
I'm good, Douglas. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. Nice to see you. Glad to have you
Absolutely.
here. Let's see. You're a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author. The book we're going to be talking about in a minute is called The Human Sales Factor. You're also the president and CEO of Tyson Group. Let's talk about that first. What does Tyson Group do?
We work with different organizations that are, looking to compete in a complex world through sales, right? So we look at their capacity, we look at their people, we look at their strategy, and then we kind of go in and help augment that a little bit, right? So, we engage a lot in pro sports and entertainment. That's a big part of our book of business. But we also, about 30% of our business is outside of sports. I would say any organization that has a semi-complex to complex sales process, we train, coach, and consult with them to help them compete in a complex world. It's usually where they're pretty competitive in nature.
Before we got on, you mentioned that you were in Detroit doing some work for Detroit Pistons, and you just said that a complex sales. Now, I get the idea if one is selling toothpaste. That's a pretty straightforward here, buy our toothpaste, right? But
Right.
what are you exactly selling with a sports team? Or what are they selling?
Yeah, well, I mean, and think of most people approach sports and entertainment as a fan, right? So when you look at an NBA team, right, you're dealing with brands, right? So you deal with the brand of the arena they play at, that becomes a brand. The Detroit Pistons is their own brand, and the NBA is a brand. And there's multiple sales that happen with any pro sports team. So from a complex standpoint, when you look at naming rights, right? So naming rights for their practice facility, then you got all the media deals that they do and what you would call sponsorship or partnership. They become very complex multi-year deals. You're looking at monster deals with that are very complex. There's another complex sell too, is the suites and premium seats that they sell. They're all B2B, right? When you're selling, suites for anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million a year, right? You're in Vegas, for instance. You look at the Vegas Golden Knights, the Raiders. I mean, they're big deals and they're multi-year deals. So, they're not sold to individual celebrities. They're sold to businesses, Fortune 500 companies. So that becomes pretty complex. And then kind of as you move down chain, you have large groups that come to games, which are sold. You have other premium parts of the arena, right? So that all has to be sold. People don't, and you think about it this way too. It has to be sold for a reason. Not every team's good, right? Meaning,
True.
as wins and losses go. So
Yeah.
so they still have to be sold. They're not just getting posted online. They're pretty complex deals that require a lot of facilitation and they're long sales processes. So as you can imagine, we're working on the strategy. We help organizations look at their talent. We assess their talent. We're looking. I just finished up this afternoon working with the management team on coaching. I have another actually trainer here today working with some of the younger folks, and we're usually in multi-year deals with these organizations and these sports groups.
Let me ask you something about the endorsements and the sponsorships. When major sports figures sign a deal, let's just say with Nike or something, to represent the shoes, is that something that they do individually as a person, or do they do that as the team?
No, they do it as in so when you think of a sport, it's a good question. So if you break it down from its simplistic standpoint, most of these sports figures are their own brand. I mean, you even see that now in college sports with the new laws they passed, they're their own brand and they can capitalize on that. So, if you took somebody like LeBron James has an agent. They have agents that help, probably as an agents help negotiate a contract for who he plays basketball with. But then he's his own brand, and there's it doesn't have to be somebody as elite as LeBron, right? They have agencies that they deal with. Now, some teams, especially with some of their players, have they have access, and it depends what league it's in. Maybe Major League Soccer, MLB. They have some access to some of the players to help activate some of the brands that that the team itself will do. So maybe like, maybe the team has cut a deal with like all the Ford dealerships in town. Well, maybe they'll get access to do a commercial or stuff from some of their other players. And, it's different for every player, obviously, too. They might be contractually obligated not to do something with Ford because maybe they have a deal with somebody else.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's
But I
both.
mean, they're pretty complex at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the answer to the question is it's both. It can be
Yeah.
as a team representative, or they can be as an individual brand.
It may require what they actually negotiate in the contract too, right? So, I think they have more access to some of the younger, more less known athletes, right? And then there's you got to remember there's players associations, there's league unions and stuff. Some of they get some access to some of these players, and there's agencies out there that deal specifically with the players that are cutting deals, like William Morris or Endeavor. There's an organization called One Team that represents a couple of players' organizations. So they're all out there that way, and all customers. So we at some level, right, are dealing with that, and it's not. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. There's some whale hunting going on out there.
Oh,
So
I bet there is. Let me pivot over to your book. Your book is called The Human Sales Factor. Who is the book designed for? Is it designed for CEOs, or is it designed for the average Joe, or who's going to be interested to read this?
when we wrote the book, it kind of morphed, and as we were coming through the pandemic, we kind of shifted, and one of my Charlie Fusco, one of my agents, or just kind of like a handler, a little bit like my publisher, I'd call her, just kind of a great personal and to help guide me. Her and I were going back and forth, and she goes, you're writing a book on sales, and I write books ultimately to position Tyson Group, right, and kind of subject matter expertise on our philosophy. And she goes, I think with the first rendition, we're preaching to the converted a little bit. And so the book started to take on this a lot of persuasion and influence, and this argument that there's so much argument out there, sales dying, there's so much technology, so much AI, but if you look at how many people are in sales, right, it's actually really wide. There's more people in sales than there's ever been before. But then we start to widen it even more, and we start to look at leaders and CEOs, and they're constantly selling their ideas. And so we start to peel back a little bit. And what is the factor? Well, the human is the sales factor. And whether it's you or me trying to sell people to get on our podcast, if it's William Morris Endeavor trying to sign an athlete to a big partnership contract with the Pistons, trying to get a big suite sold, or we're all selling our ideas, or we're trying to convince somebody to take a job with our firm, right? So it's designed to apply directly to selling an idea or concept. I mean, we talk a lot just in the book, just when you watch Shark Tank, people trying to sell their idea, trying to sell their business, trying to sell their concepts. We made it really wide that way. And it's based off a program we do called Persuasive Presentation Skills. And the program's how to engage and really deliver a formal presentation. So we took a lot of principles out of that program we have.
Is it as simple as if they like you, they'll buy what you're selling?
The question I ask a lot of groups is it more important to be liked or respected? And resoundingly, most people say respected. There is a likability factor. I mean, I come out of Dale Carnegie training. The first book I've ever read on leadership or sales was the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. But if you peel that back, that concept, is it a likability or is it a rapport? And we would say at Tyson Group that it's a rapport. And then we would say if you build a triangle with your fingers or you drew a triangle, then you would say it's a rapport, but it's also a credibility. So you have to have rapport and credibility. And say like rapport yields a level of influence, credibility yields a level of persuasion. And then you got to understand the audience. So that would be the third side of the triangle. So is it a likability factor, or is it more about your ability to influence and persuade? And I would say the latter.
Well, everybody has encountered a high pressure salesman at some point in their life.
Right.
And, the stereotype is the used car salesman.
Every time, every single time.
Because I think we've all encountered that guy, with the bad suit
Right.
and the mouth that doesn't stop going. That is someone who I would say is not likable and not respected. What would you do with somebody like that?
Well, I fundamentally the argument is most of us have to get results through people. And if you have that likability, right, that's going to allow you to move further. I would say, though, there are a lot of very credible business people that are disruptors, and you might not like them, but by the time you hear them out, they have a credibility of expertise. So standing on itself, if I had to choose one, I would say most organizations, like here today, there's two types of people in any organization, or two types of people you'll deal with. There's a type of person, when they walk into the door, the whole room lightens up. And if you know that person, you know this person even better. When they walk out of the room, the whole room lights up. I'd prefer to be the former rather than the latter.
Let me bring up one of your talking points on your bio here. We've got just about 3 minutes left. Adaptive selling in the digital era. Now, are you talking about working virtually? Because that really took off during the COVID issue, where everyone went on a Zoom call.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about, or is it something else?
It's actually a little deeper. It's almost if you're a sports fan, it's something like you would call the read offense, right? So the read offense would be, imagine a quarterback having a play that they call in the huddle, but then when they get to the line of scrimmage, they're seeing the defense give them something different. So their ability to adapt to the circumstances given, that's kind of what we're talking about. Said another way, you're a surgeon, and say as a surgeon you replace or repair labrums, right? Shoulder labrums or hip labrums. And if you treat just say a lot of your patients tend to be like 18, 19, 20-year-old college athletes. Well, you're going to be able to really kind of get in a routine, right? You're not going to deal with a lot of risk there. But let's say all of a sudden your practice changes and you're dealing with 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds and 50-year-olds that are slightly porky and high blood pressure. Well, you're not going to approach labrum surgery in a similar way. There are going to be some consistent things you do from one patient to the other, but you got to be a little bit more adaptive. And so what's happened since COVID, right? Because we have to sell differently, because we're maybe not selling face to face as much, or we got to be adaptive. An example of that would be, we were pitching a manufacturing firm, and the president and I kind of got at it. They were in the paper business, and he goes, "Lance, you keep talking about this hybrid selling or this adaptive selling. I don't want to hear about it. I need to get our people back in the plants, getting belly to belly, people face to face. That's how we do it." And I said, Jim, I said, that's all well and good, and that's what you need. But what if the people at the plants that you call on don't want you to be there now because of everything that's going on with COVID and how things change, or they're just not there? I said, is hybrid selling a thing you don't want to do, or is it a thing you're not accepting, or that adaptive selling? And he kind of paused for a second. He goes, you got a really good point. I said, yes. And so your salespeople are comfortable, and you're comfortable a certain way. I think they're going to have to adapt. I think the future's different. It's not when it's going back. It's changed. That's what we mean by adaptive selling.
Okay. Do you think it's going to be that way even when COVID is long gone, dead and buried? Do you think the change has been permanent?
Yeah, I think it's a different world right now.
Yeah.
I think you're dealing with a lot of different things. I mean, you're dealing with inflation. There's a price sensitivity. The economy surged. It clawed back. You're starting to go now through a de-hiring, re-engineering again, and companies are short staffed. I think it's changed. I mean, it never goes back to what it was. If you go back to the labrum, once you stretch your labrum, it's like it's an old rubber band, right? It's once you stretch it out, it never goes back to its original form. And I think that's what's happened with how we have to sell. It's not going to go back to its original form. So you have to be adaptable.
I think that's a good point. We are out of time, unfortunately. We'll have to wrap this up. My guest is Lance Tyson. The book is called The Human Sales Factor. The book is out now?
It is.
And last question.
Hudson,
Okay.
Hudson's, Amazon, any of those places.
Last question. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yeah. If you go to www.tysongroup.com and any social media, Twitter or LinkedIn, you can reach me.
Okay, great. Well, it was nice meeting you, Lance. Thank you for coming on the show. Best of luck with your book and everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, Douglas. Appreciate you.